Hello, welcome, Galacron here, back to Hercules, and we're still at growing pains, so we can continue. Our hero had hit his stride, and he showed no signs of slowing down. His second adventure met Hercules even before he had returned home and washed the dust of the mountains out of his newly grown beard. Just before the gates of Thebes, he came across ambassadors from Orchomenus. Orchomenus was at the time the most powerful city in the region, home to the Minyans. The Minyans were an ancient people who predated the more recent stock, among whom Alcmene and the Thebans were numbered. Archaeologists have suggested that the connection between the Minyans and the Minoans may be as close as the name suggests. The Minoan culture dominated the seafaring states of the Bronze Age Aegean. And while Orchomenus was not actually a Minoan colony, it may have had very close links with that powerful civilization. Certainly the Minyans were not a people to offend, yet that was exactly what Thebans had done. A Theban chariot, driven at speed beside the temple of Poseidon, had thrown up a stone which struck and killed the Minyan king. In recompense, Orchomenus demanded tribute of a hecatomb of cattle every year for 20 years. A hecatomb was the standard unit of cattle, being 120 of the beasts. So basically what they're saying is every year you got to fork over 120 cows because of what you did. Being a rancher himself, and we're all aware of the difficulties involved in raising cattle in those dangerous times, Hercules inquired mildly whether a hecatomb was not a trifle excessive for a minor city such as Thebes was at that time. Arrogantly, the ambassadors replied that the hecatomb was an example of their city's amazing restraint. Properly speaking, they should have taken not just the cattle, but the noses and ears of the Thebans as well. Does that sound like a threat to you? This was the wrong answer to give a proud and powerful young man who considered himself Theban by adoption. The ambassadors set off home to Orchomenus with their noses and ears removed and strung around their necks by Hercules. To ensure these horrible garlands were not removed, Hercules took the ambassadors' hands off as well. Hands off. He then informed his victims that this was all the tribute that they would carry from Thebes that year. Like, okay, which is nothing but your own parts removed from you forcibly, and you get to be sent home. We have a stitch. 3 sanctuaries stand along the road from the Neaston Gate. That of Heracles is furthest off in an open space. Here, Hercules is called the nose trimmer. Where did he get that from? The Thebans explaining that the reason for the name is that Heracles cut off the noses of the heralds who came from Orchomenus to demand tribute, the 120 cows. Hercules just was not going for it. He wasn't having it. So, back into it. The reaction from Orchomenus was predictably swift and indignant. A squadron of chariots swept down upon the city, demanding the immediate surrender of the impudent youth who had mutilated their ambassadors, namely Hercules. Creon, the Theban king, felt he had little choice but to obey. When their king had been accidentally killed, the Minyans had marched on his city and killed not a few Thebans before they were brought off with the promise of tribute. As well as cattle, the Minyans had taken the armor and weapons of the Thebans in order to keep them suitably subservient. Creon must have reasoned that if his city had not been able to withstand the Minyans before, when they were properly armed, what chance did his people have now that they were almost defenseless? Accordingly, he sent men to seek Hercules and hand him over to his city's oppressors. By now, night had fallen, and the young hero was nowhere to be found. He was out of town, further building his legend. So we jump into Triumph and Madness. And this is one that, does, actually need to be explained. It's been out there for a while. Like, Heracles went mad, killed his wife, Megara, and they had a couple of kids, and he killed them. So that story has been a part of Heracles' myth for a long time. And it's a very good one to dive into, to explain why this happened. Because it was Queen Hera. It was her fault. Anyways. More precisely, Hercules was out sabotaging the Orchomenon chariot horses, and in the process gaining another name that would stick with him through antiquity. Hippodytus, the horse stringer, early Greece, and indeed the entire ancient world had absolutely no concept of animal rights. So when Hercules sneaked by night into the corral where the enemy horses were being kept, and made the chariots useless by hamstringing the unfortunate horses which pulled them. This was seen as a cunning ploy with no unhappy side effects. Without their dreaded chariots, the Minyans were simply a small group of infantry with inadequate and unsuitable weapons. Interesting. Hercules is thinking ahead on this one. But the Minyans at least had weapons, which is more than could be said for the Thebans. However, Hercules had thought of that too, as word of his latest exploit swept the city. The young men repudiated the peace made by King Creon and demanded to be led against their oppressors. Go to the temples, Hercules told them, and there seize the weapons and armor dedicated by past generations of Theban warriors. This may have caused a degree of uncertainty among even the most hot-headed and warlike of the young men. These weapons were sacred to the gods, for it was the custom of warriors who had done great things in war to surrender their arms to their patron god or goddess in return for the favor of the god had shown to them in battle. So the weapons in the temples were the property of the Olympian gods. We can see how this could be a controversy. Given that war with Orchomenus was going to be a chancy business at best, would it really be a good idea to start by alienating the very gods on whose favor the city depended for survival? Good question. If ever Hercules needed the support of his divine father, it was now, at this early point of his career, without a sign that the gods favored Thebes and were happy for their armor to be used in the city's cause. Hercules would have been little more than a footnote in the long epic of the heroic age. A rash young man who brought about the destruction of Thebes by wildly overestimating his own abilities. I'm not so sure about that. Fortunately, for once, Father Zeus was on hand to protect his son. That the gods consented to the Thebans arming themselves was demonstrated by the fact that the gods themselves armored Hercules, providing the hero with the most splendid panoply of armor and weapons yet seen in the young world. That's interesting. So magnificent was the armor, and so evidently was it of divine origin, that the would-be warriors of Thebes abandoned their reservations and flocked to the temples to arm themselves with whatever was available. At this point, the writer must yield the page to the poet Hesiod. Again, Hesiod's theogony is the Greek myth Bible, who in 8th century BC wrote of these events. Hercules is about to don his divine armor and lead his ragtag army into battle. Like any self-respecting warrior of his day, and just as the Greeks of 2 generations later were to do before the walls of Troy, Hercules was going to war on a chariot. He begins by addressing his chariot driver. Here's the stitch from Hesiod. Except this is Hesiod, the shield of Hercules, not the theogony. But it doesn't matter, it's still Hesiod. Aeolus, rough battle is now close at hand. Do now as you have done so skillfully before. Help me as you can and turn Arion, our great black-maned horse, speedily in every direction. So we go back into it. The name of his chariot driver is perplexing, for Aeolus was the son of Hercules' half-brother Iphicles. So I guess it was his nephew? Like Hercules, Iphicles was not yet out of his teenage years, and even at his most precocious, Iphicles could not have fathered a son more than 6 years old. It would be somewhat premature to put such a child at the controls of an instrument of war that for the ancient world was something between a battle tank and a high-powered sports car, especially as one of the horses was Arion. Arion is the first mentioned of Hercules' set of divine weaponry, for he was no ordinary horse. And controlling him was no task for an amateur. Black-maned Arion was the child of 2 gods, Poseidon and Demeter. Wow. The legend says that earth-shaking Poseidon, the lord and god of the sea, was gripped by an incestuous lust for his sister Demeter, goddess of the corn. Demeter tried to escape her brother's attentions by taking the form of a mare, a horse, hiding in a herd of horses. This was an unwise choice, for Poseidon is also god of horses. That's true. And swiftly located the beast that was not one of his own, swiftly changing his form to a stallion. He found Demeter and mounted her as a hapless mare before she could escape. From this forced union was born Arion. I didn't know that. But again, those wacky gods. So, some academics will suggest that such a myth might arise, for example, from an earthquake-induced tsunami, which is from Poseidon, flooding a cornfield, Demeter. Having been salted by seawater, the land was then used to produce horses, like Arion. But we should scorn such mundane explanations and simply celebrate Arion, his huge size and prodigious strength. So I guess the horse was great, or Outstanding. Stitch here. In vain do the east and west winds race against him. No less swiftly does he carry the son of Amphitryon in his wars, fierce even with him also and impatient of control. Then it gets back into it. So says the Roman poet Statius. Indeed, Arion was definitely no My Little Pony for a 6-year-old Aeolus. Okay, that was a funny reference. My Little Pony is a toy from the 1980s. That's kind of funny. For a 6-year-old Aeolus. Therefore, it may be best to assume that Aeolus, son of Iphicles, was named in honor of this charioteer who served Hercules so nobly that day. Another stitch from Hesiod. Heracles, he put greaves of shining bronze upon his legs. These were the splendid gift of Hephaestus, his half-brother. Hephaestus, god of fire, god of the forge. We get back into it. Greaves were a sort of footless, rigid metal sock worn between ankle and knee. So it's like kind of like shin guards, but armor, and they were called greaves. The huge Greek battle shield protected everything from knee to throat, but as Achilles was later to discover, protection for the lower extremities was also a good idea. Well, Achilles was shot by Paris with an arrow through his heel where he was vulnerable, and he died. Some warriors wore just the one greave on the leg pushed forward in the battle line, but Hercules could afford a full pair. His were made by Hephaestus, the craftsman god of Olympus and maker of the finest armor on heaven and earth. It is just as well that Hephaestus and his mother were not on speaking terms. His mother was Queen Hera. Hercules and Queen Hera don't get along at this point, so should we be surprised? For Hephaestus was the son of Hera, and having her bête noire armored by her own offspring probably did little to improve child-parent relations. Well, again, Hercules was only stepson to Queen Hera. Hephaestus was blood son to Queen Hera, and she cast him out, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So we have a stitch. Next, Hercules fastened a cunningly made golden breastplate, the gift Pallas Athena, the daughter of Zeus. Over his shoulders, the mighty warrior put that armor that saves men from death, and he slung his hollow quiver over his back. Within were many death-dealing arrows, the shafts smooth and very long, and at the end fletched. Okay, the fletches is the feathers of the end of the arrow. And the person who makes them is a fletcher, someone who makes arrows, a fletcher. Fletched with feathers of a brown eagle. And he took his strong spear with its point of shining bronze. And on his heroic head he sat a well-made helmet, diamond hard, which closely fitted his temples and guarded that god-like brow. Okay, so we jump in again. According to the writer Apollodorus, 200 BC, the bow was a gift from Apollo, a magical bow. Okay, gift from Apollo. And the arrows. Okay, I mean, Apollo's the god of the sun, of healing, of plague, and of archery. His twin sister was Artemis, but she was goddess of the hunt. Apollo was god of archery. So, the bow was probably outstanding, is my guess. And though not mentioned here, Hercules also sported a sword given by Hermes to complement the olive tree club and marvelous shield which rounded off his personal arsenal. Hercules' own shield is unbreakable and unmeltable, no matter what. It can't be. Hephaestus made it. The shield simply cannot be broken at all. The olive tree club, I guess, was pretty sturdy, but it never broke on Hercules, but I don't know if it's breakable or not. If someone strong came around, could they break it? I do not know. They just said when he used it, it never broke. And after the Nemean lion, he put the claws of the Nemean lion into the end of the club. If you can believe it. Okay, so going back to Hermes giving him a sword. Hermes gave Hercules, again, half-brothers, a golden sword. Is it unbreakable? Not that I've read. They've said it's incredible. They said it's outstanding. It's a sword from Hermes. I don't know if Hephaestus made it or not. But Hercules was given two swords, one from Hermes and I think one from Athena. But at this point in time, it's a golden sword given to Hercules by his brother Hermes. So again, I've never read anywhere the sword was unbreakable. But it's said to be an outstanding sword, because Hercules is a really strong guy. I mean, he could break the sword just by using it to kill somebody. But anyways, that's the info that I got. So we have a stitch. In his hands he took his glittering shield, which none ever broke. Okay? That part's important. None ever broke his shield or crushed with a blow. Very important. It was a wonder to see, shimmering with enamel, white ivory, electrum, which is gold, a form of gold, and glowing with shining gold. So I think electrum is a different kind of gold. I'd have to look up more of that. Deadly Fate was pictured there holding one man newly wounded and another unwounded. Well, here's the thing. Hercules' shield was enamored with so much artwork. Even Zeus and Ares were on there. I mean, Hephaestus made this shield, and it's unbreakable. But there was so much artwork that was so, highly detailed, highly artistic. It's a one-of-a-kind. You couldn't mistake it for another shield. Dude, the shield of Hercules is exactly that. There's so much art on it that it's like, dude, it's only one that has this type of artwork on it. As soon as you saw it, you'd be like, dude, it's Hercules' shield, and I know it. So, one who was dead, she was dragging by the feet through the tumult. She wore on her shoulders a garment red with human blood, and terrifyingly she glared and gnashed her teeth. We jump back in. There is a whole genre in classical poetry which describes the shields of the great heroes of legend. Achilles had one, and Aeneas another. Not just shields, but huge works of art laden with symbolism. Indeed, to contain all the subjects described, each shield must have been large enough to roof a substantial building. Among the sporting scenes, battle scenes, festival scenes, besieged cities, arbors, pastoral scenes, and parades of gods and heroes, which Hercules' shield portrayed in great detail, was a depiction of Hercules' ancestor, Perseus, his grandfather. At least I think it was. Okay, we have another stitch. There, too, was the horseman Perseus, son of rich-haired Danae, with winged sandals on his feet that belonged to Hermes, and his black sheathed sword hanging from his shoulders on a cross belt of bronze. Swift as though he flew, the head of the monster, the dreaded Gorgon, on his broad back in a bag, which was a magic bag, of silver wondrous to see, from which hung bright tassels of gold. On the hero's head was the dreadful cap of Hades, the helm of Hades, and you are rendered invisible even by the gods, all the gods, even Zeus himself cannot. It's not just about not seeing you. You cannot be detected by Zeus himself. You can't be detected by anybody. That's how powerful the Cyclopes made the helm of Hades, the helmet of invisibility. Dark as the gloomiest night. So we end that stitch. The shield showed the world of Hercules with its people at work, at war, and at play. And with the shield so was the world of Hercules. We have another stitch. Around the rim flowed ocean in full stream, enclosing all the cunning work of the shield. Here swan soared and called loudly, and others were numerous, swimming upon the water, with shoals of fish nearby. The great, strong shield was a wonder to behold, even for loud, thundering Zeus, at whose orders Hephaestus had made and fitted it. So here we go. The shield of Hercules. Okay? Zeus went to Hephaestus, the god of the forge and fire, and said, "You are to make a perfect shield for my son Hercules, and make sure that he gets it." And Hephaestus is like, "You're the king of the gods." And he made an indestructible shield. You can't melt it, you can't freeze it and make it fall apart. You can't use your psionics and mind blast or whatever, I don't know, sorcery or whatever. The shield is unbreakable. You just can't do it. Not with this one. So, the valiant son of Zeus expertly bore this shield as agile and fast as the lightning of his father. He leapt upon his chariot. Okay, now we get back into it. After the wordy descriptions of Hercules in all his martial finery, the actual campaign against the Minyans is usually dismissed in a few brief sentences, as though the main achievement of Hercules in this short war was to get dressed for it. According to myth, Thebes was beside an ancient lake. In fact, the hero Cadmus founded the city after killing the water dragon which guarded it. That's interesting. This bemused Greeks of the classical era who knew of no such lake. But modern geology has proven the myth mongers correct. There was a lake. And shown that beside pre-archaic Thebes, there was indeed originally a lake, which was later drained. Well, that's no fun. When the king of the Minyans descended on Thebes with his army, he was met by Hercules and his Theban Minutemen, if that's what you want to call them, at a narrow place. Diodorus Siculus, they're just quoting. This was probably between the lake and the mountains. The narrowness of the battlefield served the Thebans as the equally constrained field of Thermopylae. If you've seen the movie 300, same thing, okay? The same military mindset, like, oh, their numbers will count for nothing if it's only this corridor. So same thing happening here for Thebes. Narrowness of the battlefield served the Thebans as the equally constrained field of Thermopylae served the 300 Spartans in later centuries. Much later, that was in 480 BC. So this was like 800 BC or whatever. But huge as the enemy host might be, its soldiers were forced to line up to enter the battle in an orderly fashion. For there was no room for them to all be deployed at once. On reaching the front of the line, the Minyan warriors met Hercules in his wrath and were promptly mown down. The battle was more equal to those parts of the field not dominated by Hercules. Well, who is surprised by this? I mean, Hercules, this guy held up the vault for 3 hours. The heavens. He held up the heavens for 3 hours. Most accounts agree that it was here, while holding the Theban battle line in place, that Amphitryon, the stepfather of Hercules, was slain while fighting heroically. The writers of later tragic plays have been unable to bear the loss of so powerful a character from the stage of Hercules' later life. Therefore, they insist that he survived. The playwriters are like, no, we don't like that. He doesn't die. He lives. So after this battle, we must consider Amphitryon as being rather like Schrodinger's cat, simultaneously alive or dead, depending on the circumstances. All right, well, the only thing that offers is confusion. If Amphitryon fell in the battle, then poetic justice demanded that someone of equal worth must die on the other side. Poetic justice is very powerful in a story told by poets. So in those versions in which Amphitryon bites the dust, a quote from Homer's Iliad, bites the dust. So Queen, the band, another one, bites the dust. He got that from Homer, the Iliad. How about that? Another one bites the dust, or just bites the dust. A soldier bites the dust. The king of the Minyans must die also. In those versions where Amphitryon survives, so does the king of the Minyans, though as a captive of the victorious Thebans, the Minyan king made a peace with Hercules, by which the tribute that had caused the war was now doubled, but was payable by the Minyans to Thebes, rather than the other way around. In the grimmer version of the tale, the Minyan king and his army were slaughtered, and Hercules and his men helped themselves to the weapons, armor, and battle standards of the slain. As dusk fell, they arrived at Orchomenus looking like the victorious army that they actually were. The Minyans naturally but mistakenly assumed that this was their army, returned from crushing the impertinent Thebans. They didn't even know. They thought it was their own army, and it was the Thebans going towards them. They're like, look, they're back from war. They beat Thebes. It was the Theban army wearing their opponent's armor and weapons. Whoa. So, trustingly, they let the soldiers into the city. In this version of the story, the Minyans paid no tribute to the Thebans at the end of the war, because once Hercules and his men were done with their city, there was no Orchomenus and no Minyans left to pay anything. So Hercules and his army, dressed as, their army, the Minyans, went into their city, killed everyone in there. So it's like, so who do we pay? Looks like nobody. We killed them all. There you have it. So, thus even as word of slaying of the lion of Cithaeron spread through Greece, hard on the heels of that report came another telling of Hercules' feats as a great general. Okay. Military talents. A great general. Armed and armored by the gods. The young hero who had humbled mighty Orchomenus. Suddenly, Hercules had stepped into the ranks of the leading warriors of his day, and had become a man whom even the king of Thebes would be proud to call a son. So a prince of Thebes Hercules duly became, because the king gave to Hercules Hercules the hand of his eldest daughter Megara in marriage. There is some dispute as to how Megara came to have the name of a Greek city northeast of Athens. Was the city named after the legendary character, or was the bride named after the city? Or was the bride named after... They made a mistake in the book here. Named after the city. For Megara has been settled since very ancient times, so a big question mark on that. However, the bride got her name. None dispute that marriage of Hercules to Megara was happy. So, our hero temporarily abandoned his career of slaughter to settle down as a husband and father. The couple took up residence in the home of the widowed, still happily married Alcmene, and settled, that's Hercules' mother, and settled down to produce an expanding brood of children. How long this period of domestic bliss endured is uncertain, and can only be roughly estimated by the varying accounts of the number of children born into the family. Again, I've heard 2, 3, and 5. So I don't know the actual count of children with Megara, because there's conflicting stories. I've heard 2, 3, and 5. So I'm not sure on that one. How long this period? Okay. Since there were 3 to 8 children, see now look at this. 8. Okay, so 3 to 8 children, they don't know. Depending which poet was doing the counting, we can guess that this interlude of serenity lasted somewhere between 5 years and a decade. I didn't know that. That's kind of interesting. Even as the count of the children in the Hercules family varies, so do accounts of what happened next. This is where we really get into it. Once again, we are forced to go with the general consensus while noting outliers from the standard tale, such as the radically different version of the playwright Euripides. But then scriptwriters have ever put the demands of a paying audience ahead of adherence to the actual narrative. So what if the playwrights changed it and said, well, we gotta make the fans happy, not what the actual facts are of the myth. Everyone agrees that the spell of Herculean happiness was brought to an end by the malice of Queen Hera. She had not forgotten her feud with the son born of her husband's adulterous affair with Alcmene. And that man's continued well-being was a daily reproach to her ability to conduct a decent vendetta. However, Zeus was currently well pleased with Hercules, so in order to get back to ruining Hercules' life, Hera had first to subvert the hero's mighty protector. Hera did this by pointing out that in those early years after the beginning of the world, the place was frankly a mess. Unlike more structured versions of creation, the world of Greek myth had not sprung into being through the methodical efforts of Faber-Deuce, as those who study myth refer to as creator god. Rather, the mythical world had emerged willy-nilly into being, with matter coalescing into shape from chaos. Chaos was the first thing in Greek myth. Just chaos. This emergence had been completely random, and some of the creatures which had emerged were hugely powerful, violently destructive, and downright antisocial. Those monsters capable of actually destroying the cosmos, Zeus and his cohorts had stopped, though not without effort. This, nevertheless, left a host of creatures running around the world of mythology, wreaking havoc despite the best efforts of the current generation of heroes. A band ever shrinking in number due to the contingencies of the job. Even the supposedly unkillable Coneus was to die in battle, nailed upright into the ground by a demented centaur who used a tree trunk as a hammer. Zeus had not created the earth, nor was he responsible for it. He and his brothers had divided the cosmos between them, with Poseidon taking the sea, Hades the underworld, and Zeus the heavens. No one ruled the earth, not least because the earth was a mighty goddess in herself, which is Gaia, the grandmother of Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. And it says here, the grandmother of Zeus and of a lot of the other Olympian gods. However, as Hera pointed out, monsters rampaging around Grandma's place made Zeus look bad, and upset the many mortals who looked to Zeus for protection. Fundamentally, Zeus was the god of order, which is actually true. Zeus just ordained himself, I am the god of order. Justice was a different goddess, it was a woman. Zeus said and claimed, I'm the god of order, not justice. So, which is why he had the government of gods and men in his charge. Yet the earth was looking pretty disorganized. Not only was Zeus doing nothing about this, but there was his allegedly mighty son, of whose potential Zeus had so often boasted. What had the man contributed lately? Because again, they're saying 5 to 10 years he was not doing heroic things or killing any monsters or whatever. So, he whose mightiest labor these days was to change the diapers on his infant babes. The king of the gods acknowledged that his wife had a point and prepared to summon Hercules back to his heroic duties. However, persuading Zeus to put Hercules back to work was only the first part of Hera's diabolical scheme. Okay? By an unlikely coincidence, at that very moment, Hercules received a summons from his cousin Eurystheus, who got his throne as king of Mycenae. It should have been Hercules. As the dominant power in the region, Mycenae could call on heroes such as Hercules if the situation required it. I wonder who decides that. King Eurystheus? So somehow, just at the moment Hera had been at work on Zeus, Eurystheus had decided that there was heroing to be done, and that Hercules should do it. Eurystheus viewed the growing power of Hercules with suspicion and summoned him to his court, intending there to order him to perform certain tasks. Hercules ignored the command until Zeus sent a message ordering him to serve the will of Eurystheus. At this, Heracles journeyed to Delphi to confirm the matter by asking the gods directly. The oracle replied that it was the will of the gods that Heracles should perform 12 labors under the supervision of King Eurystheus. Really, it was 10. Should he complete these, he would be rewarded with immortality. The development deeply depressed Heracles. He thought of his great achievements to date and felt that because of these he did not deserve to have to work overseen by one he considered beneath him, his cousin, King Eurystheus. He's nothing. Yet he also saw that he would harm himself if he did not obey Zeus, who was also his father and king of the gods. Hercules was a proud man. Indeed, this was one of his defining characteristics. Whether or not he suspected that Eurystheus had preempted him in taking the Mycenaean throne through an unfairly premature birth, and again, that's Hera again, Hercules doubtless considered King Eurystheus a pelipid. Given his own noble ancestry through Perseus, Hercules felt it demeaning to enter into the service of a family whose domination of the Peloponnese, his Perseid clan had spent generations resisting. So he dithered, and his delay in obeying the clearly stated orders of the gods gave Hera the chance to strike a wicked blow. And here it comes. Though his chronology is suspect, the playwright Euripides gives the best account of what happened next. Even as Hera schemed on Mount Olympus, matters politically had been developing in Hercules' hometown of Thebes. While Hercules was away at Delphi, the king of Thebes was overthrown by a usurper. This usurper was Lycus, a son of the sea god Poseidon. Again, that would mean it's a cousin to Hercules. Lycus noted that Princess Megara, wife of Hercules, had children of her own. Being of the former king's direct line, these children had a legitimate claim to his throne. Therefore, as a matter of dynastic principle, Lycus's power would not be secure until the children and their mother were executed. And Amphitryon as well, this being one of those occasions when he was alive. So again, that still was never solved. To ensure that killing went... Sorry, there's a mistake here. Killing went smoothly, the usurper king decided to oversee the executions in person. As things turned out, this proved to be unwise. Hercules returned home from Delphi just as the execution squad was preparing to go about its grim business. The hero was surprised and indignant to see his family dressed in funeral robes. He demanded to be brought up to speed on developments, and being Hercules, his demands were very hard to refuse. The news update was promptly followed by the shorter counter-revolution in Theban history. Once the dust had settled, Megara's father was restored to the throne by a rejoicing populace, and an unceremonious burial was given to such remains of Lycus as could be scraped from Hercules' front doorstep. All appeared to be well so, in celebratory mode. The family settled down to a formal dinner to commemorate their narrow escape. Unbeknown to them, an invisible, uninvited guest was present at the occasion. This was Lysa, the deity who brings madness. Reluctantly, she followed Hera's orders, proclaiming, "I am the daughter of Night, born of noble parents from the blood of Uranus. The power I have I use not in anger against friends, and nor do I take any pleasure in visiting the homes of men. This man against whose house I am sent is famed in heaven and earth alike. I urge you, do not wish him awful harm. I call the sun god to witness that what I do against my will. But if indeed I must serve Hera and follow as hounds in full cry follow the huntsman, then follow I shall. And not the ocean with its moaning waves, nor the earthquake, nor the thunderbolt with its blast of pain will be half so furious as my headlong charge into the heart of Heracles." A messenger survived to later carry the news to the city council chamber of Thebes, where he related the story to the stunned assembly. Sacrificial victims were in position before the altar of Zeus. The house needed to be purified, for there Heracles had cast from his hall and slain the usurper king. His lovely children stood in a group with his father, Amphitryon, and Megara, and already the basket was being passed round the altar, and we were keeping holy silence. But just as Alcmene's son had taken the torch in his right hand to dip in the holy water, he stopped without a word. His children looked up to see why their father delayed. And oh, he looked different. His bloodshot eyes rolled and bulged in their sockets, and foam dribbled down his bearded cheek. Eventually he spoke, all the while with a sort of demented chuckle. "Father, why should I sacrifice before I have slain Eurystheus? Why kindle the purifying flame only to have to do it again when I can end it all at a blow? As soon as I have brought here the head of Eurystheus, purification shall be done for all whom I have killed. Spill that water, toss away the baskets. Ha! Now give me my bow and club. I'm off to famous Mycenae. I'll need crowbars and pickaxes, and with those iron levers, I'll heave from their very foundations those city walls." And off he went. Though he had no chariot there, he thought he had, and mounted himself on a chair, using a whip on the horses, as though his fingers really held one. The bemused servants looked at each other, asking, "Is our master fooling around, or has he gone mad?" Eventually, while he uttered fearful threats against Eurystheus, his imagination brought him to Mycenae. Catching him by a muscular arm, his father demanded, "My son, what do you think you are doing? What does this bizarre conduct mean? Has the blood of your recent kills made you hysterical?" But Heracles imagined it was the father of Eurystheus abjectly pleading to touch his hand. He shoved him aside, and thinking he was about to slay the sons of King Eurystheus, he prepared his quiver and aimed his bow at his own children. The madness had already infected Hercules. In wild panic, they darted here and there. One buried himself in his hapless mother's skirts, another fled to the shadow of a pillar, while a third, like a bird, sought shelter beneath the altar. The mother cried out, "What are you doing? As a father, do you mean to slay your children?" With his aged stepfather and servants crying aloud, Heracles hunted his child round and round the pillar in dreadful circles. Finally, confronting the child, he shot him through the heart. The boy fell back, his last gasps of life spraying the stone column with blood. Then did Heracles shout for joy, boasting, "That's one of Eurystheus's brood, dead at my feet as atonement for his father's hate." So again, the madness has completely infected Hercules' mind. Then he turned his bow on the child who crouched at the altar's foot, hoping to escape unseen. But before Heracles could loose his arrow, the poor child threw himself at his father's knees, flinging his hand upward to reach his beard or neck. "Oh, I'm your child, your own. I'm no son of Eurystheus. Don't kill me, father." Heracles frowned like a Gorgon, but his son stood too close for his baleful archery. So he brought down his club and struck the boy on the head, even as a blacksmith hammers the red-hot iron. The second son caught, his bones smashed. He hurries to add a third victim to the pair, but before he could do so, the poor mother had grabbed her child, rushed into the house, and shut the doors. Then the madman, as though he really were at the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae, crowbars open the doors and throws the doorposts aside. Then, with one evil blow shot, he kills both wife and child. True madness. Rampaging on, he turns to slay his aged stepfather, but look, a phantom appeared, or so it seemed to we who looked on, it was Pallas Athena, in her plumed helmet, brandishing a spear. She hurled a rock at Hercules, which hit him on the chest and immediately quenched his frantic thirst for blood. Again, Athena looked out for a lot of her half-brothers and half-sisters. This is kind of one of those moments. So, smacking his back into a column which had split in two and fallen to the floor when the roof caved in. So Hercules was unconscious and plunged to the ground from her throwing that stone at his chest. At that, we stopped out panicked flight, and with the old man helping, we tied Hercules tightly to the pillar so that when he came round, he could do no further harm. And there he sleeps, the poor wretch, in a sleep that is anything but blessed. He's murdered his wife and children, and for myself, I know of no son of man more miserable than he. So that was a stitch from Euripides, The Madness of Heracles. So, next is Hercules in labor. So I mean, yes, it's obvious. He was ordered to go do 10 labors for his scumbag of a cousin, King Eurystheus. And Hercules is like, no, that's kind of stupid. And he's nothing to me. Why would I go work for him? He's nothing to me. I'm Hercules, and he's nothing. So Zeus kind of wanted to do it, but not that way. But it was really Queen Hera that was, truly behind it. And getting her to curse the madness in Hercules' mind to see his own family as King Eurystheus' family, like Eurystheus' wife, okay, Eurystheus' children, and, he was cursed with the madness, and he killed them all, thinking they were Eurystheus' family, and as it turned out, it was his own family. So, the truth of it all is that Queen Hera was directly responsible. Hercules physically did it. He never wanted to and would never do such a thing. And Queen Hera was directly responsible for this. So, at that point, I highly doubt Hercules was very fond of his stepmother. I mean, that's pretty harsh right there. To be cursed with madness and illusion, and he kills his wife and his own children just because Queen Hera just can't stand, King Zeus cheating on her. So this is how she reacts. This is how she behaves to make Hercules' life truly miserable. She can't do anything of revenge against her own husband, who's king of the gods. So guess what? I'm going to go mess with his son from another woman. And she did. And the hits keep coming. This is only the beginning of Hera harassing Hercules and making his life completely miserable. This is only the first. And as we continue forward with Hercules, you'll see that Hera intervenes in his life many times. The 12 labors, she'll appear, and certain other points in time, Queen Hera appears. So, anyways, that's going to do it for now. Thank you. This is Galacron signing out. Until next time, we'll get into more Hercules.